Simon Mainwairing is the founder of WeFirst, the leading social branding firm that provides consulting and training to help companies tell their stories. Everyone's telling their story, build their reputations and profits, and increase their social impact. And if that's not impressive enough, he also is the author of the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and Amazon bestseller, WeFirst, which was named the best marketing book of 2011 by Strategy and Business. So before starting WeFirst, Simon was an award-winning creative writer for the Nike brand at Wieden & Kennedy, and also the worldwide creative director for Motorola at Ogilvy. So Simon has also consulted for dozens of Fortune 500 brands, and now he's here today to talk about business transformation and how to successfully navigate the new marketing landscape. So please join me in welcoming Simon Mainwairing.
Good morning, everyone. How are you? Great. I mean that sincerely because I was there last night. I've now decided that the fastest through line to a cohesive corporate culture is a tray of margaritas at the door about this big, right? It was so funny to observe. It was wonderful because at first you were sort of like rafts of people bumping up against each other in a pool, an ocean of people. And then by the end of it, it's like this jumping castle of fast friends. You're all sort of high-fiving each other at the end. So thank you for including me in your celebration and your get-together. And as Jeff suggested, I've had a lot of experience working inside big brands, your clients, the ones that you have to deal with at the coal face of the business every day. And what I want to share with you is what we've learned from the inside. What are they doing to transform themselves to keep up with the same challenges that Jeff just took you through in terms of what you're facing? So would you be interested in hearing on what's going on inside these major brands? Yeah. Absolutely. Fantastic. Well, so let's start. There's three different areas that I'd like to talk about. One is the new normal. The second is how brands are transforming. And the third one is how do you actually lead and shape culture as a brand at Viacom? And so let's dive in. The new normal. Every single one of us in this room is a little bit scared about what's coming up. I don't know what you're like. I've got a 16 and a 13-year-old daughter. All I do is get eye rolls and, oh, Dad, give me the phone, let me do this. I feel completely out of touch, and I'm supposed to be an expert in this space. I've forgotten what color their eyes are because they're all like this all the time. Yeah, Dad, I love you, it's fantastic. The landscape is moving so quickly. So what does that manifest in all of us, particularly if we're in sales capacity? Fear. A whole raft of fears. How do we keep up? How do we ensure our own job security? How do we add value to our company? And so I want to walk us through new fears, new behaviors, and actually new opportunities that are a function of this landscape that Jeff touched on. And so here's the first thing you've got to realize about the new normal. There's a big difference between how fast technology is changing, which is changing exponentially, while we as human beings in corporations with org charts and silos are moving linearly. And at the same time, culture's moving a lot slower, but still faster than business is changing. And then you've got, I think that's a generous curve for politics. I think it's just a flat line. But here's the reality, is that the compounding power of technology and how much information and how much power we can invest in one single chip that's getting ever smaller by the minute, that is outstripping what we can do as human beings. And so it's no miracle that there's a tension going on. At the same time, look at the range of change. I mean, who here has got a drone and they're using it to stalk or follow an ex-lover that now has a restraining order against them? 1, 2, 3. Everyone, ladies, take note. No, I mean, look, you've got drones, you've got wearables, you've got the internet of everything everywhere always. Soon you're going to be driving home and your car will tell you that you're out of milk, and it'll make suggestions to you as to what store you should buy it in, and if you go into that store, you'll get 20% off on your next purchase if you upgrade and buy something else, and you'll be like, for the love of God, leave me alone. I just want to be quiet. We have so much information that we're generating, and as a function of that, is being fed back to us through data. And just to give you one example, have a look at the Internet of Things. This is the number of devices by 2018 that will be talking to each other about our lives. So the dark blue wedge down the bottom is the number of smartphones in the world. Who here, I want to see the most radical person in the room here. Who here doesn't have a smartphone? Is there anyone who doesn't have a smartphone? That would be so bold. Well, I mean, if you look at how that is dwarfed compared to the number of devices that will be talking to each other by 2018, 2019. Those devices will know more about us than we know about ourselves. And at the same time, this change is having a compounding effect. It's fascinating to watch that big data and the web and mobile, all of these core technologies like the cloud are compounding to unlock these innovative opportunities like, for example, 3D printing, the Internet of Things, renewable energy. And all of those are compounding again to have all these disruption opportunities in the grey line there. So it's not just the pace of change or the speed of change or the scale of change, it's the compounding effect of change that is leaving us all at sea, and it's why we go Friday afternoon, a glass of wine at 5 o'clock or 10 o'clock on Monday morning. Either one is good. And so, I mean, look at the degree of disruption that is going on. You've got good and green guides, none of which have guides. You've got Uber, which is the largest taxi service in the world, and they don't own any cars. You've got Facebook, the largest, most popular media site in the world, and they don't generate any content. Alibaba, the largest, most valuable e-commerce site in the world, and they don't have any inventory. And Airbnb, the largest accommodation provider in the world, and they don't own any beds. That's the degree of disruption that we're all facing. It's incredible, and it's compounding. And now let's look at new behaviors. These younger demographics, these millennials and Gen Z that we hear so much about. This is from Harvard Media, their Meaningful Brands report. And they did a survey of global consumers around the world, and they said, of all the brands you know, how many brands, what percentage would you be upset if they disappeared? Look at North America. 5%. Way to go, guys. So let's think about that for a second. Sort of like this slice over here of like 6 or 7 tables, you're good to go. You can all die at your leisure. Think about that. 95% of brands can disappear and no one will care. That's sobering. That's why we need to invest in change. That's why we need to innovate at the pace of the marketplace. That's why each one of you in this room needs to bring your best entrepreneurial skill set to bear on the company and Viacom so that you can move with the marketplace. Because this is your new consumer. Do you remember when you used to go to a rock concert to go to a rock concert? Instead of going to a rock concert to take a photograph or a video to tell people you're at a rock concert? I'm like, you know, when I have my family moments at home, there's something cute and unscripted going on, you're like, oh my God, like take a photo. Wait, do it again, yep, and moving a little bit, right? Filters, sharing, great. We're all, it's like that sort of, I don't know, that father that goes on a holiday, videos the whole thing and actually has to enjoy the holiday when he goes home watching it. We're all living these made-for-television lives. And that's the same with our audiences now. We are a media company here at Viacom. But in the same sense, we are an enabler of enabler of other media outlets, which are our customer base. We have to inspire them through our brands, through our storytelling, to amplify what we're doing. Because all they're doing is sharing constantly, consistently, to earn social currency with their friends so they can be the nodes, the amplifiers of what we're doing here at Viacom. And then finally, the opportunities. There's this false tension between story and data going on. Because here's the reality. Every single one of us in this room, I checked this morning, every single one of us are 100% qualified to be human. 100%. We are all still human beings sitting around a campfire telling stories. Story is not going anywhere. If you don't have that emotional connection to people, you're not going to motivate them to turn on a channel, to share something, to amplify something. But at the same time, these tools provide incredible insights so you can get more specific and targeted with that audience and be more meaningful to them so that you don't just annoy them by sharing information they're not interested in. So you here at Viacom had this incredible coincidence of being the most powerful storytellers out there with these incredibly powerful analytic tools. So story and data together is an undefeatable team. And so all of these different tools, social media in all its many forms, these are just different channels through which to amplify those stories that make that critical emotional connection. I have not seen a single brand that we work with anywhere in the world that have said, let's ignore the human bit, let's ignore emotion, let's just go with the data. It is a companion piece of the two, and what is so amazing for you guys is every single one of your brand, what makes Viacom so unique is that every single one of your brands is a swath of culture, a slice of culture. Look at every single one of them on there. They have such a clear demo and a culture around that. You can speak with an authority to that audience in a way that other brands can't. And so you've got the most powerful storytelling skills on one side, and you've got these analytic tools on the other. So all of us have every right to be mildly terrified on a daily basis with the way that innovation technology is kind of reframing the landscape. But at the same time, the overarching constants are storytelling and now their complement, which is data insights. And you've got both. And so let's look at brand transformations. What are these brands doing there? Because we're privileged enough to get inside the engine room at the C-suite level of what all these companies are doing. And I want to give you some sort of guide as to why they're re-engineering their storytelling so that when you go out there to sell to them or to market to them or tell the story of what you're doing, you can align better with their concerns, their aspirations, their goals, their strategies. So there's three elements to this. One is brand positioning, one is consumer engagement, and one is community architecture. And so let's have a look. When you talk about brand positioning, singularity, being a celebrant, and consistency are now critical. And let's have a look at what I mean. These 6 brands up here, incredibly complex, global footprints, supply chains, the whole thing. And yet they have distilled their entire marketing message down to 1 or 2 words: singularity. So it's sustainable living with Unilever, Starbucks, shared planet. You know, when Airbnb came out to have a message, it didn't say we're going to give you a great place to stay for less. You know, you get to choose or customize where you want to stay. It said belong anywhere. That is so much more powerful and evocative, this sense of belonging, particularly in the context of being out of your home outright, but then in somebody else's home. Belong anywhere. Look at what CVS did. I mean, do you remember when CVS said they were going to ban tobacco products? Did you see that in the news? And everyone's like, they're idiots. It's going to be 1.5 billion. You know, they're going to have to absorb that hit, depending on who you were reading at the time. 2 weeks later, they launched a national quit smoking campaign, and then 2 weeks later, they renamed themselves CVS Health. Why do you think they're doing that? Because they're looking at the research, they're looking at the demographics, they're looking at the healthcare system and saying they want to own health in the future rather than just be a pharmaceutical chain. And if you listen to the CEO when he actually made the announcement, he said, we want to own the future of healthcare. So how do they bring that to life in their storytelling? Health is everything. They want to own health. What do they want to own about health? They want to own everything. That's the singularity of their messaging. And the reason this is so important is the power of social media, the power of mobile, is not my ability to sell to any one of you, to say, hey, watch a Viacom show or whatever it might be. But rather, it's the power of one to many, to inspire you to say that to somebody else. And so when you keep that in mind, the more distilled, the more singular, the more innately shareable you are in your messaging, the singularity, the greater chance you have that you can empower your whole viewer base to amplify what you're doing. Does that make sense? But if we think about it in a kind of transactional broadcast sense, I'm telling you about us, someone feels like they're being sold to anyway, so they're not going to respond. Or they're robbed of the opportunity to go, wow, they get me, and I kind of like what they're doing, and I'm going to share it with others. And that is when you unlock the true power of social media. That's when you get that amplification. And then secondly, you must be the celebrant rather than celebrity of your customer community, your viewing community. So many brands, even when they're talking about their purpose, they talk about it in a self-directed way. They kind of say, look at what we're doing with our employees, volunteering their hours. Look at the donation matching we're doing. Look at the contributions we've made over how many years. Rather than celebrating the success that that's having out in the world, the people's lives that you're impacting. So who remembers this P&G campaign from the last Olympics, where they thanked mums, right? You know, I was sitting there in the garage. We have a TV in our garage. The retreat, I've been married 23 years. It's like the man cave, the retreat at the back, and watching it. And this ad came on where they're thanking mums. And I remember my 15-year-old daughter looked across at my wife and said, oh my God, I almost cried. And they didn't celebrate P&G. They didn't celebrate the athletes. They didn't celebrate the Olympics. They celebrated those mums who had taken their kid to soccer practice for 14 years and you'd never scored a competitive goal. You know what I mean? There's so many of you in the room. That's why you're in this world, right? None of us are pro athletes. And they put them on a pedestal. And do you think that endeared them, you know, to their customer base and they wanted to talk about what they're doing? Absolutely. And that went right across all their media channels you see in the bottom right there. So when you think about talking to your community, even if you're doing it in a way that will resonate with them, that's purposeful, that's meaningful, instead of doing it in a self-directed way, you have to do it in an outbound way. You have to get off yourself and onto the other. You have to be the celebrant rather than the celebrity of your customer community. And this is what you're seeing the smartest brands doing. And then thirdly, you have to have consistency. You have to have alignment. So here's Unilever. When you look at some other brands out there, you kind of think, wow, they're so lucky. They've got it all together. It all seems to be in alignment and consistent. It's almost they started fresh at some point. I'm telling you for a fact, it's messy inside every single brand out there. We're all managing our image. It's all good. But inside, everyone's like, oh, my God, we're freaking out. So what Unilever had to do was they had to post-rationalize all these billion-dollar brands like Axe and Dove and Lifebuoy and rationalize them underneath the umbrella of Bright Future, which is their new overarching platform. So how did they do it? They created acts of sunlight that create a brighter future and characterized each different individual thing that the individual brands do as acts of sunlight so they could aggregate up to what that number was at that time at the top, 279 million. So it's not pretty. They're post-rationalizing. They're swapping out the engine of their brand as it's hurtling down the road. So just know this period of transition that you're in, this sort of the discomfort of change is what every brand is facing to get the alignment they need. And what does it look like when you've done it? Marks & Spencer in London, one of the most successful grocery chains, you see it on the electric trucks. They're positioning as Plan A because there is no Plan B. You see it on their shelf wobblers. In Australia, we call them shelf wobblers. You should write that down. It's very important. And, you see in their corporate offices, in the front windows, all their different commitments for Plan A. And you see it on the backs of the T-shirts of the people who work at the store. Consistency right across the board. So if there's one fundamental takeaway I would love you to have at this point is you have to own a fundamental human property. You have to own something that is intrinsic to being human, that is innately emotional, that because of that is innately shareable so that you can inspire other people to engage around this fundamental property. And because it's sort of universal and personal at the same time, you can unpack it in so many different ways. Secondly, let's look at consumer engagement. You've got to look at the shifts that your brand partners are doing in terms of co-ownership, co-authorship, and co-creation. And let's have a look. Employees. Look at what Unilever's doing here. When they're putting all their materials together, they're saying you, the employee, are the new head of sustainability. Or fresh ideas, powerhouse brands, and innovative products made by you. They are elevating the employee to the higher status inside the company as the architect of its future. Is that more compelling, whether it's recruitment, retention, and so on, than saying, hey, come and work for us? Absolutely. Or if you look at it on the consumer side, Levi's. When Levi's had their 140th anniversary of jeans, they didn't go out there and get the cool guy and cool girl slung all over each other looking post-coital, as they have for a long time. They reached out to everybody else and said, hey, send us in a portrait of you in your jeans. And as a marketer, as a brand, or as an ad person, you kind of go, oh my God, is that going to work? Are we going to get 3 entries and it's going to be horrible? We have to justify it upstairs and we're dead. I'm just going to sign my name. They did that, and they got tens of thousands of entries because every single person wanted to have the portrait of themselves in their Levi's jeans. And then they curated those and turned them into a book. And then they did a series of fashion shows in malls all around the country where regular people got to walk like models doing those things, which is just completely abnormal. And then all the advertising featured those regular people, and it was great because if you look at the book, there's some regular people who just kind of wanted to have a good photo of themselves, and then there's those priceless freaks that just come out of the cupboard, who've got the pants through their arms and they're naked from the waist down or whatever. Just awesome. The kaleidoscope of humanity. But they're engaging their customer base to build their brand, to tell their story, to actually create their marketing. And you see it with the VMAs recently, when you sort of offload ownership of an event to a host, and by extension, the people that they bring to the party, their aesthetic, their ideas for what the actual experience should be like. So all the brands that you're trying to reach out to are now looking out to their customer base and saying, how can we own our shared vision, our common purpose together? So when you speak to them, make sure you recognize that they are going through a very difficult transition right now where they're saying, I'm going to relinquish a little bit of control of my brand, and we're going to share ownership to inspire engagement. Secondly, co-authorship. Patagonia, a wonderful brand, almost sort of synonymous with environmental responsibility. before almost anybody else, they got the Patagonia ambassadors out there, elite athletes in a number of different outdoor sports, from rock climbing or whatever it is, to just journal what they're doing while they're wearing the clothes. And these are some of those people who just do miraculous things on a daily basis. If you look at REI, what they're doing is they've reached out to both their members, which are their employees, and also customers, and created films about them. We could be creating films about all of you, what's going on in your life, what's meaningful in your life, in alignment with the values of the company. And you've got very, very old gentlemen who've been longtime fans of the brand there, through to, these women who did a running club to help foster sort of a love of the outdoor sports. And, you see it co-authorship in terms of larger consumer brands like Tom's or Dove. I had the pleasure of being the interim CMO at Tom's for 4 months this year, and when they're in a transition phase. And the one thing Tom's gets so well is co-ownership of their brand. Why? Because it's fundamentally built into the DNA of the company, into their business model, right? One for one. I do something, it goes to somebody else. You can't avoid it because it's institutionalized in the business model, but it's very, very demonstrative of what we all need to be doing as brands. Or Dove with their social experiments. Who here have seen this campaign where, they put a sign, beautiful and ugly, above 2 different doors, and they got ladies to walk through and see what they did in different parts around the world, and a lot of ladies are like, oh my God, I'm going to go over here, and and then there's those ones who are just like, boom, and they're walking backwards and forwards 2 or 3 times with the beautiful one, and they're singing and they're videoing themselves. Awesome. So, there's a brand out there that is allowing co-authorship of their story through social experiments. How can you do that? How can you go to your clients and create opportunities like that which speak to something so fundamental and emotional as what real beauty is, but in an interactive way that can generate content that will amplify your brand? How can you do that? Or co-creation. Airbnb created the first feature film through Vine videos. So they wrote a long script, they carved it up into a number of different slices. People entered their video versions of those different slices. The ones that got selected got a reward, and they composed the first feature-length film from Vine videos. Interesting idea. Or if you look at Sport England and Always, 2 campaigns that won Grand Prix at the Cannes Advertising Festival this year. Both of their campaigns, all of their content is user-generated content, stories about their customers. Whether it's Sport England, which is all about women training in the UK, or whether it's Always, which is all about, like a girl and redefining what it means to be a girl in this world. It's all customer-created content. Or finally, look at Starbucks and Gap. Starbucks created a film series called Meet Me at Starbucks. And all they did was tell the story of unusual experiences that their customers have had at Starbucks. One woman went there, and while she was there was a group of people who were deaf, and they were communicating through signing, and she joined them and sort of got to know them a little bit and so on. And they just told the story of that. And it's all about moments of connection. It's all about bringing people together, the emotional connection that's facilitated between people. Or Gap, One Stitch Closer. All they did was they thought, Gap was, how do we support women's empowerment? So without spending a cent, they got some of their employees to go out and train female entrepreneurs in how to start a business for themselves. And those women then went off and started social enterprises that had a positive impact. So rather than be the celebrity, they were the celebrant, where they created films about the women and the positive impact they were having. One Stitch Closer, it's called. Really emotional storytelling, really connects with your audience, very, very shareable. These are some of the ways that brands are sort of getting off themselves onto their audience and giving them a way to be involved in building the business, but also having a positive social impact. And then finally, community architecture. This is something that I learned. We had the pleasure of working with Coca-Cola for a few years now, and you have to put together a number of different things if you truly want to architect a community. Architect a community, build a self-sustaining collection of people that take on a life of their own. Wouldn't that be great? Where you suddenly stop rowing as an ad salesperson and it takes on a life of its own because you've connected with that audience so well that the brands are looking to you and saying, wow, you've got something going on there. We want to buy more of that. So let's look at each of those 3 elements. The first thing you need to do with strategy is you need to have a long-term singular mission. Most companies said with love, they spend a lot of money broadcasting their schizophrenia to everyone. They really do. We're this over here, we're this on this channel, we're this last year, we're this tomorrow. And as a consumer, you're out there going, oh my God, you're crazy. I couldn't repeat what you are to anybody else. I don't even know who you are. You need a long-term story arc that will have resonance over time because you keep ringing that same bell. And then each of the different tactics that you do, however you engage them, through whatever brand, it needs to reinforce that same message. They need to be like vertebrae in the spine of a story or chapters in a longer story arc. And then here's the piece that most people forget. When you engage someone, when you're as a brand, you've got a viewer engaged, you then forget to reward them to maintain their interest. What most brands do is they go, all right, we've got a 6-week flight of this or that, we're using these media channels, whatever it might be, and you do it, and then it's over, you go, oh my God, thank God that's over. And then all that community engagement disappears. Instead of suddenly upgrading that engagement, rewarding them. It might be some premium content. It might be an invitation to an event. It might be access to something that other people don't get access to. But take some of that community with you so that over time you're building a self-sustaining customer community. And it's no accident when you put those three together that you can see how you build a community that takes on a life of its own. Secondly, collaboration. We're so used to holding on to our brand, onto our piece of the emotional pie in our category, yet more and more we're seeing an expectation from your viewers and from the media and from all stakeholders that we need to collaborate towards higher ends. So you're seeing Ben & Jerry's take arguably a very, very beautiful car called a Tesla and make it look incredibly ugly by putting their signage all over it. But they're doing it in the service of climate change, because they're aligned from a values point of view. Or you see around equality and the right to love, you see Gap partnering with Levi's. Unprecedented. This would never have happened 5 or 10 years ago. Or you see Nike reaching out to USAID and NASA and the State Department, and they've launched Launch.org, which is just a platform to unlock the innovations we need to create a better world. Think about the intellectual property in this room. Think about all the brains in this room. What could you do together and through collaboration to add resonance to Viacom as a brand out there in the world in a way that's going to be meaningful to ever more stakeholders? Or there's collaboration sector-wide. I mean, climate change has finally got its time. And you're seeing, here in the US, Climate Action Coalition. Or you're seeing all these different brands come together around equality. We're shifting from this sense of control, this sense of it's all about me, the brand, this sense of traditional media where I speak at people, to collaboration, to co-creation, to coalition, to cooperation in the service of values that are meaningful and relevant to your viewers' lives. That's what your brands are grappling with. And it is an incredible discomfort. Because up till now, here's what they've been doing. Your brands have been sort of sitting there going, they love me. They love me. This might have happened last night, I don't know. They love me. Instead of, on the other side, the community saying, we love you. You're kind of effectively saying the same thing, but one is far truer than the other. You need to inspire that loyalty in your customer base, in your viewing base, as a brand and as a media company. And then content. There is no limit to the content that you can offer as arguably the most masterful storytellers in the country, if not on the planet. I mean, here you've got GE doing a 3-minute film about how they move large containers around the world and getting engagement and shareability from it. We created this VR film for Toms that allowed people to go on a virtual giving trip. So now when you go into a Nordstrom's, you can try on the pair of shoes, but you're kind of like, well, you want to close out that feedback loop. I want to see what difference that's making in the world. I want to see where those shoes are going. So you put on your VR goggles, and in this case, the film takes you to the Gaza Strip, and they're handing out shoes, and you can see what's going on. Is that more compelling from an emotional storytelling point of view in terms of the impact you're having by buying that pair of shoes? Absolutely. Or you look at, Illy, which has created a feature film around women's empowerment, or Patagonia, which is absolutely committed to restoring the main sort of watercourse arteries through the US for salmon and other fish life. And so they created a film around it called Damnation that in 2014 was the audience choice at South by. This is what your customer base is doing. I think you probably very readily get a sense of what a fundamental shift this is across the board for all of them. So when you go in there and talk to them about ad sales or marketing or what you're offering them, just know that this collaborative landscape is where they live. And so if there's a second thing that I'd like you to take away is that you must be the celebrant, not celebrity of your viewing community, of your client community, of your customer community. We have to get off ourselves and onto somebody else. Thirdly, let's look at cultural leadership. There's the opportunity to lead change, there's the opportunity to lead conversations, and the highest order of all is the opportunity to literally shape culture. Let's have a look at it at a base level. Brands are leading change by changing their products. CVS, getting rid of their tobacco products, launching a national quit smoking campaign. Lego, those things that we got stuck up our nose and swallowed when we were young, they are now remaking them out of sustainable products because they want to walk away from their petrochemical dependent past. Why? Because that's the way the world is changing. Huge, fundamental shift in the DNA of the company, all their supply chain, all their processes. Or new products. You know, you've got Fati, which is a surfing company. You know, they take ocean trash and PET bottles and create clothing out of them, while Raw has done a partnership with Pharrell and Bionics and just launched clothing line, a denim line that is literally made out of ocean plastic. You can't get any more direct connection to the difference you're making when you actually take the plastic out of the ocean, make it into the denim you're wearing. And who here is a surfer? Is anyone a surfer? Surfer. Oh my God, I'm Australian, I'm offended, I'm mortified. No, oh, a couple. I surfed once. No. Patagonia announced this week the first neoprene-free wetsuit. So it's not relying on petrochemical products or whatever. That is an innovation story. That is a product story. That is a brand story. That is a value story. That is an environment story. That's how brands are unpacking these different opportunities. And larger than that, brands are taking on their entire industry. It's almost like they're cannibalizing themselves. Levi's has taken on the entire denim industry and said, wash your clothes less. Because what you do as a consumer is about 35% of the environmental impact of what that item will have when you factor in all the other things that went into making it. Or Patagonia has said denim is a dirty business because there is hundreds of liters of water that go into a pair of jeans like this. So suddenly brands are taking on, cannibalizing, attacking, reinventing their entire own industries in service of the values that they stand for. A massive change in mindset. And let's look at how these brands are leading conversations. Let's look at how this is building their business. We all know about Patagonia, right? We all know about it. Does everyone see that Don't Buy This Jacket campaign on Black Friday a couple of years ago? Most of us in the marketing world would have seen it. We all have different touch points with the brand here. Better Than You, these different campaigns you see up here. And I don't know what it's like for you, but my experience of the brand is that they seem to be leading a conversation around responsible consumption. They care about the environment, and they're leading a conversation around responsible consumption. Let's have a look at how they're doing that strategically. We look back at 2005 with Common Threads, their recycling program. Then the Footprint Chronicles, where you could take the SKU number of a jacket and find out the carbon footprint of any item you're wearing. Then they had the Sustainable Apparel Coalition they launched. Then Common Threads, where you reduce and repair products. Don't Buy This Jacket in 2011. 2013, Stories We Wear, where they're reaching out to their customer base and asking them for their stories. And most recently, Better Than You. They launched a fleet of trucks to go around the country, and instead of buying a new product, you could take them a product and they'd repair it, right? And what they did was my company's in Venice, California. They got every hipster in Venice, California with a beard and a curly mustache and put them in the back of these vans. There's none left in Venice, they're all in these vans. But they're basically going out into the marketplace and say, you know what, don't buy something new. In fact, can we run defense and get out there to you? We're going to find you, bring it in, we're going to repair it. Why? Because we have a higher order commitment to what you care about, which is responsible consumption. And at the same time, they're doing something very interesting. They have demonstrated the social proof of their commitment, the legitimacy of their commitment, by doing these activist initiatives that are making a difference in the world. So 2005, 1% of sales went to the environment. Ambassadors Program I mentioned, Sustainable Apparel Coalition. They recently set up a $20 million fund to incubate, the next generation of companies that will reinvent the apparel industry. Damnation that I mentioned, and Patagonia Park. So this is the legitimacy they're claiming. This is storytelling of the highest order because it shows that they're actually committed to the work of change. This other stuff beforehand, that's storytelling, that's marketing, that's advertising. This other work is the work of change. And so I would invite all of us as brands to really consider not only how are we telling our story well, but how are we showing up in the world in a way that we demonstrate our way of being. Viacom has the muscle, the license, the global footprint to be a force for change in the world. Let's look at it at a product level. Dove, a product owned by Unilever. We've all seen the different Dove campaigns over the last few years, right, ladies? Real Beauty and so on, and men kind of looking for the ladies' magazines. Different iterations of the campaign, very powerful campaign when they got the policeman, the police artist to sketch what a woman thought she looked like and then compared it to what she actually looked like. Here's what they've done to lead a cultural conversation regarding real beauty. 2004, vote for real beauty. Then they showed the women in their real bodies. They did the self-esteem transformations where they de-Photoshop people. Then they kind of celebrated age and beauty around the world. Then they did the drawing campaign, and most recently, Choose Beautiful. We as consumers, we as viewers, we as sort of customers in the broader sense, we just see all these different pieces at different times, but we don't actually get to retroactively look back inside a company, look at the strategy and going, what are they doing? Why are they doing it? How is this building them resonance within culture that takes on a life of its own? And this is what they're doing. Or let's look at a wonderful example, Starbucks, right? Starbucks has been all over the media for the last 2 or 3 years. Am I correct? People have loved them. People have been peed off with them. They have kept themselves top of mind for 2 or 3 years, whether it's gridlock in Congress, whether it's same-sex marriage, whether it's education for veterans, whether most recently 2 weeks ago, education for veteran spouses and their kids, same-sex marriage. How does a coffee brand talk about all this stuff, these flashpoints of culture? Here's what they're doing. And I learned this working on Nike. No one told you this, but after 3 or 4 years, you kind of see it. You get the winter brief, you get the summer brief, and so on. Nike has a message that goes on all the way through. How do you stop that message from getting stale? How do you stop it from getting repetitive? You got shoe, you got athlete, you got sport. What are you going to do? Here's what they do. At one period of time, you aspire towards being the elite athlete, the LeBron James. And for a period of time, you want to be that athlete, and everything's about that athlete. I can be that athlete. And then after a while, you kind of go, I'm not sure I can be that athlete. And suddenly they pivot, and they go and focus on the every athlete. Have you seen those campaigns where suddenly they turn the city into an urban landscape where you can do sport and so on, and it's about you and me being the elite athlete, whether it's the Olympics or otherwise. And then they pivot back up to the elite athlete. This elite athlete, every athlete, elite athlete, that's the bandwidth in which they're playing, and they're constantly oscillating between those two sort of outer extremes. In the same way, Starbucks is maintaining its relevance by leaning into its core values and playing a very meaningful role in these flashpoint issues. So gridlock in Congress, boycotting political donations, on and on it goes. Racism. The great thing about the racism debate, and they really got their derrieres handed to them quite royally in the media, the great thing about that is they actually talk about racism in their town halls with Howard Schultz. So this was a natural extension of what they do. And at the same time, irrespective of the consequences, they pushed the boundaries of that conversation, what was permissible to talk about. They moved the needle forward. And this is how they're leading a cultural conversation. And what is the umbrella that Starbucks has that makes all of this justifiable strategically? Their positioning is shared planet. Shared planet. So they can talk about anything under this larger umbrella of shared planet, whether it's same-sex marriage, post-traumatic stress disorder they gave the donation to, most recently veterans donation. This is all about our shared experience of life. This is what the brands that you are talking to are doing. They're trying to lead cultural conversations. And here's If those three examples lead to anything, I want to draw a distinction that's going on right now that we recognize in the marketplace that most people have no idea about. Even if a brand is becoming purposeful and trying to resonate and co-create and co-author with their customer base, they're talking in terms of the current debate with respect to that product or service or industry. They're defined by the current debate. But if you look at sustainable living, shared planet, IBM Smarter Planet, Chipotle, food with integrity, they are all pointing towards a future state, an end state, a promise of what difference they're going to make in the world. How the world will be better off because they are here. Why? Because your customer base, your viewing base, their audience are informed by the web, social media, and smartphones. They know about climate change, loss of biodiversity, income disparity, all these different things going on. And they're starting to care about these things. Climate change in California, where I live, you have to reduce water intake by 35% or you get fined. It's starting to touch our lives. And so millennials and Gen Z and viewers in a broader sense are looking to brands and going, are you part of the problem or are you part of the solution? Because I'm going to vote for you with my dollars in the shopping aisle. And what little I can do, I want to do. And by supporting you, I can support change, if I know what you stand for. And there's nothing more dangerous than leaving a vacuum that will be filled with misinformation or inappropriate media or mischaracterizations or just mudslinging, like some of the stuff that Jeff showed at the beginning. So this white space is about, as a brand, to frame yourself as a cultural change agent and point to the difference you're going to make in the world. It'll not only make every single one of your lives more meaningful because you realize you're contributing to something very, very powerful, but it also aligns with what your clients, your customers are facing on a daily basis from their audience. So what is really going on? If you want to know what's really going on inside the smartest brands in the world right now, is there's a gold rush going on. The landscape, the marketing landscape used to be defined in terms of profit for profit's sake, typically over the back of others, right? Now, for all the reasons we've touched on, it's being defined by purpose in the service of building business and social impact. The profit motive is as important as ever, but brands, in response to their consumers and their customers, if you're a B2B company, are leaning into what they stand for and the difference they're making. So, Better Than You, Responsible Consumption with Patagonia, Sustainable Living, Shared Planet. All of these different brands have taken their incredibly complex businesses and in the context of a very competitive marketing landscape and distilled themselves down to these very singular, meaningful propositions. And they're doing that for a very real reason. Let's look at Tesla. Tesla is an archetype of this new way of thinking. When Elon Musk launched Tesla, his first blog post, he did not say, we're going to start a car company. Does anyone know what he said? He said, we're going to make mass sustainable transportation possible. That's why they launched an infinity mile warranty. That's why they opened up their battery IP technology to competitors. That's why they did a partnership with BMW and Nissan, all of which is counterintuitive to a competitive marketing landscape, right? What do you mean you're giving it away? What do you mean you're doing a partnership with competitors? What do you mean you can bring it back after 1 million miles and you'll still fix it for free? It's insane. You put yourself out of business. But their commitment was to this higher order mission. And the best thing about a mission is when you really lean into it and that becomes your only litmus test, your only filter for the marketing engagement or what you're doing out there in the world, it absolutely fries the brains of your competitors. They are absolutely dumbstruck. Why are you doing this? How can you be doing this? It doesn't make sense. It's because they're letting their marketing be driven by their mission. So just have a look. More recently, 2013, we saw Don't Buy This Jacket. And I've spoken down at Patagonia and I said to Rick Ridgway, the VP of Environmental Initiatives, I said to him, dude, you're Patagonia, right? Don't buy this jacket. Everyone probably just went, high five, awesome idea. He was like, no, man, we were so scared. We're they're gonna hate us, we're gonna lose our jobs, with a total risk. And then all their brand loyalists stood up and said, hey, that's really leaning into what we stand for. And they celebrated it and became a viral hit, earned media, all that good stuff. Look at what REI has done literally a few weeks ago for Thanksgiving, right? Opt outside. Have you seen the ads on TV, the CEO on the top of the mountain? They're saying, don't go shopping, go outside. Go outside. And you may wonder to yourself, where's this all going to lead? Okay, I get it. Brands are now engaging with their consumers in a way that is meaningful and relevant to their lives. But what happens when every brand is doing it, right? What happens when every brand is purposeful? Here's what I think is going to happen. Many years ago, it was a differentiator to be green, right? It was green. And then everyone started to be green, and then everyone started selling stuff in Hessian sacks, and you didn't know if they meant it or not, and it didn't mean anything to be green, right? Green kind of came and went. Came and went. And then there was sustainability. Every brand had to be sustainable. Came and went. It's table stakes now. Every brand has to be sustainable and demonstrably so. At the same time, now we're being purposeful. I'll tell you what I think is going to happen. It's going to be, we have to be more transparent. Then we have to be accountable, and so on and so on. And it's like we're peeling back the layers of disingenuous communication that we've built up over the last 6 or 7 decades when we were drunk on the power of media. And because of the web, because of social media, because of smartphones, which we cannot turn back, our customer base or the consumers for the brands you're talking to are sitting there going, just want to call BS on that. That's not true. Every single one of us in our Facebook pages see these different posts where they're exposing brands all the time. So we're peeling back these different layers, whether it's green, sustainable, purposeful, transparency, accountability. We're peeling it back to a place of authenticity and integrity as a brand where you generally make a difference in the world. Now, it's not going to be pretty and it's not going to be perfect. But this is one of the knock-on effects that are happening when you put information and media in the hands of citizens and consumers. That's a fundamental, dramatic, exponential shift in the marketplace. And here's the results. I mean, this is Time magazine in February this year. When did the CEO of a coffee company get on the front of Time magazine with the headline, "What Starbucks Knows About America"? And those different boxes, the venti boxes, I never understand what you call coffee in this country. I've been here 14 years. Decaf, but they've got jobs, race, veterans, education. When did a coffee company get to speak to those key cultural issues? It is generating incredible earned media for. So if you are going out to Starbucks and selling media, this is the conversation you need to be having. How can you empower them to connect with their audience more meaningfully in ways that will inspire them to talk about the brand and, by extension, to really sort of add value to what you're offering Starbucks? You know, so if I had to give you a third takeaway, it's brands must transcend their products, services, or category to shape culture. Viacom has the opportunity and the expertise and the initiatives between storytelling and analytics now to be a force for change in the world. And really, let me ask you, if not you, then who? You are the expert storytellers. Everyone else over here is selling soap powder and shoes. You've got incredible content. You've got the power of narrative. You've got characters. You've got brand loyalty, fan loyalty. You have more resources at your disposal than anybody else in the CPG or B2B world. Bar none. And so when you look at these 3 areas, you have to look at this landscape of change that we're in and see it as an entrepreneurial opportunity in which you are better qualified than almost any other brand out there. You have to look at it in terms of how these other brands are transforming. And then you have to assume, you have to embrace, you have to step into the role to be a cultural leader in your own right and on behalf of your brand clients. That way you can walk into a room to do your ad sales and you can have a much more meaningful and substantive conversation than just units and cost. You can say, this is what we stand for, and this is how we're connecting with these key constituents that you want. This is what's meaningful to them. This is how we're engaging them. You have these chunks of culture at your disposal, whether it's BET, whether it's MTV, whether it's Nick Jr., any one of them is a slice of culture that any other brand would kill to have. And so I want to leave you with this challenge. Does anyone know what this picture is? Who knows what this picture is? Right? First footprint on the moon, right? Neil Armstrong's first footprint on it. Does anyone else know what else it is? What else it is? It is the biggest advertising mistake in the history of mankind. Bar none, unless Elon Musk or Richard Branson get to Mars. Why? Does anyone know? The boot was made by 3M and their platform was innovation and they forgot to put their logo on the bottom of the boot. You literally had the whole world staring at you. Your platform is innovation. And there's some guy Bob out the back going,
Hey, Steve, come on. Do you reckon we should have put a logo on the boot?
And I'm not making this up. When I was out at 3M and we did a tour of their innovation center, and they've got all the different things like Post-it notes, and then you go over to the next thing, and this is a replica of the boot that they made for Neil Armstrong. And it's almost like you go from a wedding to a funeral. They're like, oh yeah, this is the boot we made for Neil Armstrong. Moving on. And it's for that reason. They tell that story. They miss the opportunity to tell their story on the global stage. Do not make that mistake. Your clients out there are in a gold rush to carve out the difference they're going to make in the world in a way that's meaningful to their customer base. By extension, Viacom has the same opportunity to help them do that and to do it in your own right. And when you do that, your work will not only be so much more fulfilling personally, but you'll start building your business with your clients, but their customers will build your business with you. So here's my details. If you want these slides, just email there. We'll send them to you in case they help. Thank you so much for your time.